Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And welcome to day 2 of the Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. My name is David Mazza. I'm a first-year MBA student at MIT Sloan. And it is my pleasure to introduce to you our panel, Rebooting the Lakers-Celtics Rivalry. Our distinguished panelists today are Jeannie Buss, controlling owner and CEO of the Los Angeles Lakers, Wyc Grousbeck, managing partner, governor, and CEO of the Boston Celtics, and Jackie McMullen, award-winning writer for ESPN.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for fighting our lovely New England weather to get here for our first panel of the day, which I promise you is going to be fun. Oh, David has something else to say. I apologize.
Sorry.
I'm just very excited about this panel.
Just want to say that panel will run for about 45 minutes. We will leave about 10 minutes for audience Q&A. If you'd like to submit a question, please do so through Twitter using the hashtag #RebootingARivalry. Thank you.
Am I good? I can go. Okay. So thanks for being here this morning. So we've been talking quite a bit off stage about this incredible rivalry, one of the best in sports, maybe the best in sports. And as you all know, it goes back many, many years. So I'm going to start with you, Jeannie. Your dad bought the Lakers and literally changed the fortunes of the franchise. So what is your earliest memory of Lakers Celtics? What's your most searing memory of Lakers Celtics?
My father, Dr. Jerry Buss, made the decision to buy the Lakers because he felt that there was a very strong East Coast bias in the NBA, meaning that the only teams that mattered were the Knicks, Philadelphia, and of course the Celtics.
We won 11 out of 13 championships.
See?
I say
see what
we.
I mean?
I wasn't actually there. I mean, it's not really a bias if you've got 11 trophies in a row.
And so it was really important to him to be able to beat the Celtics. That's how he started his career in the NBA, and we continue that legacy today.
Okay.
Want to beat the Celtics.
But give me your memory. So how old were you when your dad bought your team?
I was a senior in high school, so I was 17 years old.
So give me your most vivid memory of this rivalry. Maybe it was a regular season game, maybe it was a playoff win or loss. What really?
I think there's so many great moments, but I would say it was the first time, I believe it was, now I'm going to get this wrong, 85 was when the Lakers won in Boston.
Right.
And that really was a moment that, I think is still the most cherished championship, even with all the other ones that we've won since, just because it validated exactly what Dr. Buss wanted to do. And, a player like Magic Johnson, who's now part of our front office, that's what drives us, is the competition. And
were you there?
Of course I was there. I think I had seats back in the old arena. They literally had seats where you sat behind like a concrete pole.
That's where all the Lakers fan went.
That's where the seats that
We
they
put an
gave
extra
us.
one up just for you.
Yes. That's great. Wyc, were you at that game?
I was not at that game. I was watching it from my summer job.
Okay, what was your summer job? Give us, how old are you?
I was in I'm a lot older apparently than Jeannie. I hadn't realized. Yes, I did know. But I was working in New York City, didn't go to those games, but 84 and 85, those great years of rivalry, woke me up to the whole thing. But I'm born and raised in Boston, and I've watched all 4 teams all the way through.
Sure.
As long as I could remember. But 84 and 85 were the key years.
So I wasn't there because I wasn't quite astute enough or accomplished enough to get that call. I was usually the 20th person in, because back then we had 20 journalists covering Celtics versus Lakers, and that is no exaggeration, from the same paper. 20 people from the Boston Globe to cover one game. That's seriously how important it was to us. I didn't make the cut for that particular game. Anyhow, I bring this up because I think my experience in all the years I've been covering the NBA is the climate of player relationships has changed dramatically. I mean, in '84, when Magic misses a free throw in the Garden, James Worthy, misses a free throw, Max walks across the floor gives him the choke sign. Kevin McHale takes down Kurt Rambis in '84 with a clothesline that would now get him suspended probably for 60 or 70 games. And so Dennis Johnson, the former Celtic, told me a great story. He used to work out all summer in LA, which still happens to this day. All players from all teams work out in LA. And Irvin always used to welcome him to those games until he signed, ended up getting traded to the Celtics. And then he showed up to the game and Irvin wouldn't let him in. So to me, I don't feel the same, I don't want to use the word, animosity. There was some
Jackie,
animosity.
I have felt it, Kevin Garnett and Rajon Rondo on our teams that were good, most recent, really good teams. KG, the things he would say and do to opposing players.
Yeah.
Rondo in the huddle of the other team, listening.
Okay.
And it goes on from there. And then the Pierce-LeBron duels through the years that have gone both directions. There's real, and Russell Westbrook just in the press the other day, he hates everybody else and he forbids everybody on the Thunder from talking to another team. I don't think it's all gone. I think that's overstated.
Okay. But so Rondo is now with the Lakers. He had what a fantastic game that was at Boston Garden, and he hit the game winner. I believe he went and visited your locker room before the game. This is kind of the thing, I just can't imagine that ever happening back in the 80s or even 90s.
Whenever I see anybody from '08 from that team, I spend as long as I can with them. And there was one right after we had traded Pierce and Garnett to Brooklyn. They came back through the first time we played Brooklyn in Boston after the trade, I think it was. And the lights go down for a ceremony. There was I guess they went down for the anthem, to get ready for the anthem.
Right.
And I feel these arms around me from behind, these huge arms. I'm like, it was KG.
Right.
And we weren't huggy, but this was just a time to reconnect, and that was KG coming over. And I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it. That connection is lifelong.
So Jeannie, you have Irvin Magic Johnson in charge of your franchise. Wick has Danny Ainge in charge of his.
How perfect
So
is
can you
that?
just talk a little bit about the kismet of that? And Irvin, we were talking again backstage, who is one of the most congenial men I've ever met. When you are with him in a room, he makes you feel like you are the only person in the room. Yet he is a cold-blooded killer, truly.
He, goes around with the big smile on his face, but I can tell you he is bloodthirsty and cutthroat and wants to win, and will do everything he can to get us where we need to be back at that level. And I remember when he started the job about 2 years ago, he was in conversations with Danny about a player that he was interested in. And all I could think to myself was, if Irvin really thinks that Danny's going to make a trade with him, he's got to really think about that one. But
Danny would throw his mother into the right trade.
That's right.
Danny is one of the most controversial athletes and GMs I've ever been around in my life. So some of you are too young to remember this, but Danny got in an altercation with a player named Tree Rollins for the Atlanta Hawks. And it was one of the greatest headlines I've ever seen in any newspaper, and it was Tree Bites Man. That was the headline. And yet, over the course of history, because Danny is so controversial, if you stop NBA fans on the street, more than half of them are convinced that Danny bit Tree.
Yeah, Danny, it drives him batty.
I'm sure it does.
If he had bit him, he'd be happy to take the credit, but it was the other way around.
Right, exactly. Edgar Jones bit him once, and his dentures came out in Danny's arm. Ask him that story sometime. But just, if you can give me an idea of, so these two are going to be talking back and forth. This is how it's going to be. Larry Bird, for a time, was in Indiana, so Larry and Irvin might have had a brief time to talk trades. There's got to be some trash talking going on here about because I do believe even, Irvin has only been with the Lakers, but Danny was with Phoenix, but I think these loyalties run pretty deep. Am I right?
Well, I think Danny felt like the only GM job he would ever take was the Celtics. I think it's perfect for him. I think it's probably the same for Magic, I would imagine. Although he's got the Dodgers too. but we can explain that later, what he's doing over there. But I think Danny being back in Celtic green and bringing the pride of the 80s back, and having won a couple of rings back then, it adds to his stature, because not only does he make trades, but he helps Brad manage the team. He's talking one-on-one with players all the time, and he's bringing a perspective not only of being a successful player, but a Celtic champion. And so I think it really helps that he's back to where he should be with the Celtics.
So part of the title of this panel is Rebooting this rivalry, and I think both of your franchises made pretty seismic decisions in the last 10 years or so. Jeannie, in your case, it was a decision to keep Kobe Bryant and to let him retire as a Laker. And I wonder if you can take us through the ruminations over, that was a pretty big decision, and it may have set you back for a while. You're on your way back now, but what went into making that decision?
I think that when you have a player like Kobe and what he's done for the franchise, it was really important to us to have him be a Laker for life. I'm not sure that's going to be possible in the future, just because the way the collective bargaining agreement has evolved, it's harder and harder to keep players on your team for long term. And our league's about revenue sharing, but it's also about player sharing. And the player movement, while it can seem painful, has actually been very entertaining for fans, to think about different trades and all the movement in the league. But if I could just go back to, talking about the rivalry, I think it's important that people realize that, you really define yourself based on who your opponent is. And so the better your opponent is, it brings out the best in you. And so when we can sit up here and kind of tease each other about how we feel about each other's franchises, but I admire what the Celtics do and their approach to things in terms of the style of play they have, the coach, just how they do things, because it means that it makes us have to be better at what we do. And so there is that respect. It isn't just, I want to, beat them, which I do, but I want it to be, everybody doing the best job that they can. And certainly, in our case with Kobe Bryant, we had this opportunity to, renew that rivalry with the Celtics in the 2000s, which made it very special.
Right, and I think I'm sure you knew the risks or understood that there would be a step back by hanging on to Kobe, right? I'm sure that those discussions.
Yeah, I mean, he's a player who hadn't suffered a big injury in his career, and then of course the Achilles. But when I look at somebody like Vince Carter, and I really thought Kobe could play into his 40s. Because of the way he worked and the way he took care of himself. But unfortunately, that Achilles really,
is a tough one.
Really took a toll.
Yep.
So Wick, the Celtics made a seismic decision of a different kind. Paul Pierce, who wanted to begin and end his career as a Celtic. But I remember Danny telling me this 4 years before he did this. He said to me, I'm not going to be like Red Auerbach and hang on to my big three too long, which I think history will say that Red Auerbach maybe should have made a move on Parrish, McHale, and Bird, but he decided to let them fade off into the sunset together. How difficult a decision was it for a player who won you a championship, you as your first championship as an owner, who had become so engaged?
First and only. But this is a good time to put this on, just to remind me at least it's one.
I knew I was going to ask you where you're at.
Okay.
Wow, I'm glad I set that up for you.
Yeah.
But how difficult you were? I'm sorry. It took me so long. How difficult was it to pull it down? It was obviously one of the biggest steals, and I don't think it was hindsight either. I think many of us knew at the time you made that deal that it was an incredible deal, and it was going to set you up for the future. I'm sorry, it's just true. And but how difficult was it for you personally?
Well, first of all, I brought Red Auerbach back into the organization. First thing I did when I took charge, he had been out brought him back in as team president.
A little, not covered well enough, by the way. You're correct. What happened to Red Auerbach?
And I worked with him for 4 years, and I listened. It may not seem like I listened all that much. I listened closely to Red for 4 straight years and took in everything I possibly could. And he did trade Danny Ainge, which probably Danny still burns about a little bit. So I think Danny saw both sides of that.
And you know what? He traded Danny. I was on that road trip. We were in Sacramento, had just ended a long West Coast trip, reflight commercial back then, flew all the way home, and then they told him he got traded to Sacramento.
Yeah.
I always felt bad about that.
Anyway. Well, he feels a little bit bad about it too, but he learned from it. And I learned from Red. He said, you know, kid, I'll back you up as owner, but you got to do what's right for Celtic pride, which was my partners, Steve Paliuka, Bob Epstein, my dad, and all the rest of our partners. We burned to try to do what's best for Celtic pride, not for any other reason. We're doing our best. It doesn't always work out, but we try. It's just like Lakers pride and the respect that we feel for them. And so I knew I had to do what's right. And I know that's a data and stats conference. I've been here since the first one. And I've been saying every time, there's data and stats, but then there's common sense and intuition and gut feeling and eyeballs. And so I'm sort of in the middle. But I looked up the data. I think it was a data-driven decision to make the trade. So in 2008, our team was rated 10th offensively and first defensively. We were 66 and 16. Mm-hmm. Paul Pierce was 31, Kevin Garnett was 32, and we won the championship. 2010, offense 15, defense 5, 50 and 32, lost in 7 games to the Lakers.
Jeannie remembers that.
Yeah, she forgot all about 2008. 2013, offensive rating 24, defensive rating 7, team record 41 and 40, Pierce is 36, Garnett is 37. We lost in the first round to, of all people, the New York Knicks, 4 games to 2. Got blown out. Danny came in and said, I can trade those guys for 2 first-round picks. I said, go get a third. I think that group over there and that owner wants to win, and they're convinced that these guys can still play, and I'm convinced they can still play as well. But if we get a 3rd first-round pick, and so Danny came back and said, we got a 3rd first-round pick. I said, go get a 4th. He said, have you never done a deal before? I said, I've done a few deals. I want to wait until they say no. I'm not sure they've said no yet. Danny came back and said, they said no. I said, make it a swap. We'll swap that pick. And we are expected to be far worse, and they're expected to be far better. It may never swap. We didn't know that it would swap. We thought they'd be quite good, to be honest. We didn't think we were pulling one over on Brooklyn. But let's get a swap. It's a chance.
Oh, I think we did.
And, well, I didn't. Just to be honest, we didn't think this was a fleecing. We thought that, though, that 3 picks plus a swap was the way to rebuild, and that swap turned into the number 1 pick, which turned into Tatum and another number 1 pick. So it turned into the Markelle Fultz pick.
Right.
So that's how the deal went, and it was hard to do, but you know, there's the hug from KG. I hung out with Paul twice in the last few months. You know, we moved on. It was hard to do, but I wanted to make that trade, and so did Danny, and so did Brad, our newly hired coach, to start the rebuild. Right.
And I think really what happened in Brooklyn was those players got old fast, but also Darren Williams just didn't end up being the player that the Brooklyn Nets thought he would. I remember when Paul and KG went there, they thought he would be, they were saying, you could be an MVP. We're not coming here to be the MVPs of this team, and that's where things went awry for them.
So I care deeply about relationships with the players. I notice the players caring deeply about the teams, even though they moved. A lot of these guys really do care about the legacies of these 2 great franchises, as an example, and being part of the banners in the rafters and all of that if they can. It's really different at the Lakers and the Celtics. I care about them. I didn't approve the trade lightly, and it still maybe hurts a little to this day to have done it, but it's led us to a place of we've had a few more years it was the way we felt like we had to rebuild.
Interesting footnote on that trade is, I'm sure you remember, Kevin Garnett had a no trade clause. So Paul had to convince Kevin, look, they're going to trade me, please come with me. And KG agreed to it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he had a no trade clause that year. So I do think each of you have unique challenges because you are the Lakers and you are the Celtics. I think it's a lot like the New England Patriots. Everybody really roots for them to fail. And I imagine there's a little bit of that for both of you. And I think, Jeannie, you probably felt it quite a bit here in recent months with, by the way, we cannot say, I can, but they cannot say 2 words. Anthony Davis, okay? It's tampering.
Who?
Thank you. But I can. And so the furor surrounding Anthony Davis, I thought, revealed a lot of things. And one of them was, and you don't have to speak of he who shall not be named, but I would like you to speak to the idea that there's a feeling in this league, I think, that we don't want to help the Lakers. Did you feel that?
We don't use that as an excuse, I think there are teams out there that, don't want to see us do well, just as, you have to take care of your business, your team, and what worries me is if there are teams colluding behind the scenes. That shouldn't happen.
Of course.
And it's not fair to the players, and that's not how this league runs. And Wick and I can sit up here and joke around about our rivalry with each other. Something that my dad always stood for in the league was he could take off his Laker hat and consider everything based on how it would affect the league, how would it affect all 30 teams, any decision that needed to be made. And Wick is very much that way in terms of his leadership at the Board of Governors, that you have to take an overall view. We're only as good as our weakest team in this league. And I think that there's a lot of rivalry and maybe some jealousy, but we don't run our team based on what other people think we should or shouldn't do. We just do what's best for us. And when Wick was talking about having to trade players that had won a championship for him, there was a day where we had to trade Shaquille O'Neal.
Right.
And just for financial reasons, he wanted a contract that my dad didn't want to give him, and he was traded. But the day he was traded, I spent, time building that bridge, because I knew someday he would be part of the Laker family because he'd been part of our history. And yes, he went on to win another championship in Miami. But when he...
and he went on to be a Celtic for a year, and our ratings went from 2 to 10.
And you know what? If he hadn't...
Which is when I signed my new TV deal.
If he hadn't gotten hurt, talk about data analytics. The analytics with Shaq on the court versus off the court for you guys were through the roof.
We had Shaq and Rondo on the same team, and everybody and their grandmother was watching us.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt.
It's a lot of fun, but...
I don't...
No, go ahead.
Speaking of the Board of Governors, I think if you took an anonymous or secret ballot of the 30 governors and add in Adam Silver, and you say who is the most respected owner around the table, or in the very top few, it might be Jeannie Buss. And she doesn't speak all the time, but she speaks, and she's listened to.
Thank you.
It's true.
So if you also took a poll of the Board of Governors, my little birdies tell me that if you asked about 2 collaborative owners that are trying to affect change with some of the old guard, and one by one they're leaving, it's these 2. These 2 are 2 peas in a pod. Yes, they're on separate, very competitive rivalries, but they've become a little bit of a collaborative force inside that building also. So strange bedfellows, as we say. One of the things I do want to talk a little bit more about is this idea of player empowerment. Certainly, Jeannie, LeBron James led that charge. I don't think there's any question about that, beginning with the decision. And he has encouraged, I guess, players to control their own future. I think it's a big departure from the past. Wick, you're dealing with this now. You've got your best player, Kyrie Irving, who is a little mixed now on his future and could really change the course of what your franchise does. So I wonder if you can each speak to that. And is it a good thing that the players are this empowered? How, as owners, do you have to be more collaborative than perhaps you were in the past? How has it changed the landscape of the NBA?
I think, I'm proud of our league. I'm very proud of our commissioner who wants our players to stand up and talk about the things that that are important to them, to be part of their community and to be leaders. You know, the parts that I worry about are when they become outspoken and talk about, you know, in the middle of their, you know, 5-year contract, talk about wanting to be traded. That I think
is happening a lot,
right? Which I think is something that we need to discuss, you know, probably in collective bargaining, because that really puts a team in a tough position, and you know, it shouldn't be that way. There's got to be a better way for that to be handled, because it's not good for the player, because the fans are upset, and there has to be a different solution. But you know, going back to, you know, players leaving your team, and I think we have to address also the humanity of these are people, the players are people, we're people, and there's friendships that happen. And I think that just because a player leaves your team and joins another team, it doesn't mean you have to stop following them on Instagram. You know, that you can be happy for them in their new situation and want to see them do well. And, you know, where there isn't any accusations of tampering or anything like that. I mean, the connections that are made, the friendships that are made are real. And I don't know if you can really legislate, you know, you're never to speak to that person, don't make eye contact, or, you know, you'll be investigated for tampering. That I think we have to figure out, because it's ridiculous.
Well, you mentioned something that happened last night. Jeannie and Wick were at the Celtics game together last night, sitting together on the floor. And Trevor Ariza, who plays for the Washington Wizards now, poor Trevor Ariza, thought he was leaving the Suns for a good team. Well, honestly.
I mean, we beat them. What does that tell you?
But Trevor ran by and gave you a hug. And were you? I'm sure your first
He played on the Lakers.
Played on the Lakers.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I should have said that. So I'm sure your first instinct is, well, isn't that nice? But does your mind then start thinking, oh no,
Yeah.
is this on Sports Center? Is that what happens?
Yeah, and you know, and I don't think it's fair to, you know, you can't legislate how, you know, a true friendship like that, the respect between an organization and a player. And I think if we start doing that, then we're going to take the heart out of our business. And I think that's what makes our league so special, is that we empower the players to be human beings and to be part of a community.
So Wick, on player empowerment.
Yeah, so I'm there's a big bright side to it, and I think in the '60s it was really a local fans, and maybe sort of the Celtics weren't selling out even when they were going on this championship runs. Basketball was an afterthought sport in a way, growing.
Right.
In the '80s, it started to take off with Bird and Magic. '92 started to take it global with the Dream Team, and that started to become about the players, and Michael Jordan took it to a new level. And now, since I came in 2003, I mean, the league has gone up 5 times, 6 times. It's gone completely global. And it didn't go global because the Celtics and the Lakers changed their colors or their, we're part of it, and we're a legacy, and we've got all the banners, each of these teams. But it's because the players have stepped forward and become global superstars. And we love that, and that's part of our business. We're proud of it. We love being involved with it. We love winning championships with these guys if we possibly can. I mean, so having the players become global icons is the goal. And it's fun to watch for everybody around the world to watch these guys compete in our colors with our support. And so I'm in favor of it, and the consequence is these guys want to decide where they play. I mean, that's human nature, and they've earned that. And there's maybe around the edges, how is it done, and can you make public statements? But empowering these great players to new heights is part of the business and part of life. And when you find a great person in your life, and you would try to empower them, that's what you do. So I'm sort of a very positive voice in all of this.
So I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. Your team is struggling a bit.
Sorry, was that for Jeannie?
Yeah, wait. Are you talking to me or him?
Actually, it does apply to both.
Okay, I'll start.
I'll start with you. A team that was
I thought that just.
in the East. There's something going on.
We are contending in the East. I mean, we're not contending for the regular season title in the East. We're contending to get out of the East.
Okay.
And I think the players that we, not being defensive, just being factual, I think the players we have on the court have the capability of getting to the finals. We also have the capability of losing in the first round. And we have a very, very good set of opponents in the East, all of whom seemingly have beaten us in the last month. So that's that. But you know, from November to February 1st, we had the best record in the league. You know, February has been the worst February I can remember.
Right.
Thank God it's March. We're undefeated in March. But there's enough here, and the playoffs is different. You know, let's say Indiana comes in, Philadelphia comes in. We're on the road in Philly and Milwaukee, and you know it's going to be a grind. It's be amazing to get through either one of those teams.
Right.
But give us a chance. I don't think anybody wants to play us in the playoffs. So I really do think, after 16 years in the league, I think these guys still have a chance. So we're going to play it that way.
So I asked Josh Harris this question after our panel yesterday. I probably should have asked it during the panel. I asked him if the playoffs started today, you would play Philadelphia in the first round. They're 2-9 against you over the last 3 seasons, and you eliminated them last year in the playoffs. So I asked him if Philadelphia were to lose in the first round, would that be a disappointment? And he called it very problematic. So I'll ask you the same question. What if your Boston Celtics team, this team that I thought Danny very expertly assembled, loses in the first round? What kind of season will it be for your team?
I don't think I need to say that publicly. I want to watch the losses, watch how we played. Losing to a team like Philadelphia would not be a disgrace if it was a hard-fought series.
Okay.
So I'd rather not answer that, to be honest. I don't want to. I want to say that I'm disappointed so far with how we've played in probably a bunch of our games. I've seen flashes. I really have a lot of hope for these guys. So I'm not going to send a negative signal right now. I'm going to say let's not lose in the first round.
Okay, cool. Jeannie, your team's a little different, but the carrot for your team is let's get to the playoffs. Let's make the postseason. LeBron has always been to the postseason. So I ask you the same question. If you can't get there, are you falling short of an expectation, or are you falling short of a goal, which I think are two different things?
You know, the goal was to make the playoffs this season because we've sat out the last 5 years. This would make it 6 years in a row to not be in the playoffs, which is not where the Lakers are. That's not the standard that we had set. You know, there's still an outside chance, but you know, the good news is that we still have our draft pick. So if we don't make the playoffs, then we take another path and we move forward. So what I feel is we have so many young players. I'd really like them to have an opportunity to get some playoff experience because it's the only way to get it is to be in the playoffs, and we haven't delivered that to them. So so it'll be a disappointment, and having a player like LeBron who missed almost 20 games this season with an injury. I think there was one game in November where Coach Walton had access to every player on our roster where everybody was healthy. So we've been plagued with injuries, and the Western Conference is really tough. And we are defeated in March. We lost last night, so I can't even say that. So we're not out of it yet, and it's really up to them, the players, to take it up another notch if they really want it to be there.
Okay, cool. So I'm going to ask you each, if we can. We're at this point, and I think you're both on the path that you would like to be. I think that's accurate. And you've had so many celebrated players, both franchises, Hall of Famers. We could fill a room with them. But I'd like to play a little bit of what if, and perhaps a transaction that you wanted to happen that didn't happen, or a player that, and maybe I'll start with you, Wick. I know at one point, Chris Paul, Danny was lusting after Chris Paul, I think since the day Chris Paul was born, I'm pretty sure. And you got close, I think, right? a couple times?
Yeah, I think he's still. I'm not sure.
Oh,
I
can you talk about him?
But,
Okay, gotcha.
But
That's probably
I
true.
will say that there was a trade back in the day when our coach Doc Rivers, who loves golf and basketball, and I'm not sure which one he loves more. He's very good at both of them, each of them. We wouldn't have won the championship without Doc, and he's been huge. But at one point, he offered me 3 strokes a side, 6 strokes per round for life if we made a certain trade. So I mean, these trades, when you get somebody in your sights, like the Brooklyn deal, when you get people in your sights and you want to go get them, you'll throw everything in. And there have been some trades we made. I mean, it hurt to let Kendrick Perkins go.
Yeah, that was a big one, wasn't it?
And we had extra meetings about it and thought again about it and thought again about it, and we thought it gave us a better chance. We didn't end up winning anymore. Not necessarily because of the trade, but it just hurt to see Perk go. When I saw him again a month ago and got to have dinner with him, it was just,
You want that one back, maybe. But there were a couple things at play there. I mean, if I recall, he was talking about a contract extension, and his numbers were a little out of line with what you...
I just love Perk. I can't help it. I love Perk. I love Rondo.
Yeah.
It's the Trevor Ariza factor, apparently. Trevor Ariza, I could take him or leave him, but he seems like a nice guy. But my guys are Perk and Rondo. Your guy's Trevor Ariza. And Kobe.
No, I love having Rondo.
Yeah.
By the way.
Yeah, Rondo's a really interesting
he's great.
guy.
We could have a whole nother panel on Rondo.
Yes, we could.
He is unique.
But so Jeannie,
He's
was
hilarious.
there a transaction that you made or didn't make, or that's maybe a player that's out of the league now that you can tell us about?
It's like, when the first thing that my dad, he bought the team in May of 1979, and in June, the draft, they had the #1 pick, and Jerry West advised him to take Sidney Moncrief. And my dad saw what potential Magic Johnson had in terms of his personality and the Showtime kind of thing that he wanted to build. And so, but what was unusual was Magic came out as a hardship, meaning he was 19 years old, whereas usually players stayed through college and then were drafted. And so there was risk taking somebody who you'd only seen play 1 year of college basketball. My dad knew exactly what he was trying to do in terms of the style of play he wanted, and Magic Johnson was his player.
They used to play pool, am I right? They used to play pool.
Oh, Magic and
your dad, right? A lot of pool.
Absolutely. They were as close as any two people. Really, a very special friendship about a businessman mentoring somebody who wanted to learn about business, and their relationship is so unique that we're working on a 6-part documentary series. And lots has been done about Larry Bird and Magic in the 80s, but never really through the eyes of Jerry Buss. And I think we'll capture a lot of the, one of the popular documentaries was the O.J. Simpson documentary that kind of captured Los Angeles during a time, and I think the 80s in LA was a time where the Forum was right in the middle of 2 gang territories, but literally when you went to the Forum, it was declared an area of truce, that no gang violence ever took place at the Forum. That's how much the Lakers meant to the city, and it made everybody get along.
Can you describe we have some younger people on Showtime in the A's. I mean, it was a spectacle. It really was.
The Showtime came from Dr. Buss's desire. It was about the entertainment. And so he wanted it to be not just about basketball, but also the entire event. And that's why when the team would take a break, then the Laker girls would come out so that the show would keep going. And I know there's a lot of people who've talked about should, female dancers be, taken out of sports, it's exploitive or whatever. It, really what it was about giving the women the platform, about it being equal time. Hey, the men get to be, center stage. Now it's the ladies' turns to be center stage. So the Lakers were the first team to have a dance team perform at games.
And we were the last.
You guys were the last.
Steve Paliuk and I went down and met with Red Auerbach before we closed the deal. He pulled out a list. There's cigar smoke. His office is in Washington, D.C., always was. Little known fact. And there's letter openers and
lots of
pictures
stuff.
of the Pope and Cardinal Cushing. And you just couldn't even, and there's Red, like with the Wizard of Oz in the back. You approach this desk and sit down. He goes, "You're the new owners, huh?" And he was clearly unimpressed. And we were very impressed, and he was unimpressed. And then he said, I got a list. And we had been warned that he was going to have a list, but we didn't know what was on it.
This is a great story. I've never heard this.
And I wouldn't make anything up to all these.
No, of course
to
you wouldn't. I'm sorry. I'm just.
I'd make something up to Jeannie. I wouldn't make something up to anybody else. And he says, number one, no dancing girls. I'm like, oh, meanwhile, at the time we had 10,000 people in the stands out of 18,000 seats. And the team was struggling, to say the least.
They were.
We hadn't even taken over, and we figured we were going to do Showtime Boston or something, and no dancing girls. We didn't have. Finally, right before he passed away, the year before, I said, "Red, we'd really like to have a dance team, and we've got a sponsor and everything else." And he had told me all along, "You've got to pay the bills. Whatever you do, pay the payroll, make the payroll." He had trouble making payroll. Pay the players, put more money into the players, win the championship. So I said, "Red, I'd really like your permission to have a dance team." And he said, "Are you going to make money on it?" I said, "Yes, actually, with the sponsorship, it's going to actually net out some money for the team." He goes, "Fine, go ahead, the hell with it." So I got his blessing.
Did you do it while he was alive?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh, okay. I knew it was right near the end of his life.
Right
That's right, and then it killed him. Right.
So his signature is on the inside of this ring, which we read because he was so inspirational in. And we asked him about hiring Danny. He said, "Yeah, hire Danny. He's just lucky. He was just born that way, born lucky, and he's a Celtic." So Red had a lot to do with it. So here's to Red, and here's to Jerry.
So speaking about a time gone by, though, imagine a GM crossing the floor after an exhibition game to confront a referee.
Well, Red told me he went and punched an opposing owner.
He did, Ben Kerner.
Yeah, he just
did. That's a true
went across
story.
the floor and punched him. And he was telling me this, like, this is how you do it.
You know what that was about? It was about the wins.
Red was encouraging me to go smack whomever, Ted Leonsis or Dan Gilbert.
Right. But you know what that was about? It's a crossover Lakers-Celtic. It was Bill Sharman. Bill Sharman always knew exactly how high the rims were. And so he would go to an arena and shoot before the game, and he could tell if the rims weren't regulation. So he went to Red before the game and said, "These rims aren't regulation." So Red, of course, delighted in going to Ben Kerner, who I believe fired him from a job, and said, "Your rims aren't regulation." And Ben Kerner is like, "You sir." That's how it all happened.
Yeah, but the next thing you know, Red laid
There
him
you
out.
go.
This is Celtic,
the days.
his message was be an instigator, not a retaliator. Take the first punch. That's Red Auerbach.
Yeah.
And now here we are, Lakers Celtics, it's a little calmer.
Yeah.
A little bit.
But we still want to win.
I do want to ask you both, do you remember how much your dad paid for the team?
It was about $16 million.
Wick, how much did you pay for the Boston Celtics?
We borrowed a bunch of money and paid $200 million of cash.
Okay. I think both of your franchises are valued at over $2 billion today. Am I correct? Give or take?
Yeah.
I'm not looking for a
sale,
loan. I'm
so
just
what
trying to keep the
difference does
panel
it
going.
make?
But I wonder if you can speak to the growth of the NBA since you're both heavily involved in this. Is there a ceiling, or is globalization the next thing that carries you to $3 billion, perhaps?
I'll just say one quick thing. And I'm glad the question came about it, and I'm glad it came at the end, because I'm sure that the Lakers never did it for money. Knowing Jerry and knowing Jeannie, and I know that my group, my partners, and I never did the Celtics for money. Although, we.
It's not. It beats a poke in the eye with a sharp stick.
Yeah,
right?
it does. But the truth of it is, it just had nothing to do with it, and I was never made of money in any way. Not not like that. But anyway, that's why these franchises have been successful, is because the people behind them, did it for other reasons, for pride and for greater reasons. Or anyway, my partners in the Bus family. So I just believe that, and I just want to say it before we talk about money. So anyway, global.
Well, but I mean, where's the ceiling? Is there a ceiling?
I think that you're going to see a rise in values again once we figure out the gambling on games.
Right. That's the next big thing, isn't it?
And we have a commissioner who was very proactive and stepped up, and the day will come when you'll be able to place bets on teams on your smartphone, and that kind of will bring in revenue that may even someday surpass what we make in broadcast revenues.
Yeah. I was
That's
speaking
really
with
saying something.
my wife Amelia over there the other day, and about this, and said it used to be a local sport, it's gone national, it's gone global, and she said, yeah, that stadium turned into the whole world because the whole world can watch these games now. And I was in Marrakesh. I had a car racing company that was racing in Marrakesh, and I had a board meeting. I was in Marrakesh, Morocco the other day, watching the game at 1 a.m. on a cell connection in Marrakesh.
Wow.
With no lag, full high def, or it looked like high def on whatever the best an iPhone screen is. Maybe it's not technically high def, but it was high def, and it was no lag, and we lost. So unfortunately, you can watch anywhere. I think our broadcast rights overseas can go up 5x or 10x, whereas our broadcast rights in the States it'd be foolish to assume they can go much higher because they're very high, but we're trying to give them good value. Maybe they will. But overseas we're one of the two global sports, soccer and basketball, and I think the future is so bright for the NBA.
China, right? China's your big fit. Okay, I'm going to take some questions because I should have done that sooner. For each of you, good question. Your all-time Lakers starting five. Good luck with that. All-time Celtics starting five. Good luck with that.
We got 42 players in the Hall of Fame.
Not my
I have a starting
problem.
42.
Starting 42.
Go ahead. I don't do these.
Okay, all right, I'll ask you another question. With player movement and free agency, can any two teams ever have the same rivalry that the Lakers and Celtics have? Is it possible anymore? That's a good question, whoever asked that. You have to answer one of these questions.
Yeah.
That's a tough question.
We've got between us 33 championships, and between our organizations, 33 championships. We're 1-1. But I just don't. Let's just keep it going.
Yeah.
But I mean, is it possible because of player movement is what I guess the question is, right? Because to your point, Jeannie, very few players will begin and end their careers with the same team any longer.
Yeah.
I think it's your fan base that really drives the rivalry. Mm-hmm. And so, I couldn't get over going to the game last night. Everyone was wearing green. I'm like, wow, they wear it deep. It's like, that's their team.
Okay. For each of you, what is the hardest decision you've had to make as an owner that you feel impacted your franchise? And that can be on or off the court, I would say.
Hardest decision?
For me, it was having to fire my brother.
I can imagine. That must be really hard.
No, it was difficult, but it was important to my dad that the Lakers stay relevant, and he gave me the authority and the power to make any changes necessary to make sure that the franchise wouldn't falter, and that's why I did it.
So how much does that mean to you? You have brothers, you have sisters, and you were the one that had that connection with your dad. That's an awesome responsibility, isn't it?
I spent many years by his side, attending Board of Governors. He knew that I knew what was important to keep. I like saying that, my dad had 6 kids, but the Lakers was the baby, and he wanted me to take care of the baby. And so I did what I had to do. So I guess it wasn't that hard because I knew I had to do it.
Okay.
So, Wick?
The hardest part of all this actually was deciding to buy the team in the first place and going all in on that, and then attracting great partners and getting the deal done. and believing that I could run it as a day-to-day CEO. That was by far the hardest part, because everything since then, I've tried to think of what would Red do. I've had great partners. I've had fans helping me out with advice every single day in the streets of Boston, by email and everything else. But really the hardest part was believing that this could happen and that I could, with help and with others, lead it. Something this great, so much bigger than myself. So the decision since, the trades have been hard and they haven't always worked out. Losing seasons are very tough. Any season where you don't end with a trophy is brutal and difficult, but the hardest part was getting here, and I'm thankful to everybody who helped get me here.
You've done a great job, Whit.
Thank you.
You really have.
You too.
Okay, what are the single most important components to build to winning culture and chemistry?
We were looking for those this year.
A little bit, yep.
The chemistry is, winning culture and chemistry. Doc Rivers, brilliant coach, took the big three when we put them together, our version of the big three, in the summer of '07, fall of '07, he took them around in the duck boats and he said, this is what it's going to look like when we win, and we've got to win it this year because you guys aren't getting any younger. But they were each averaging 21 to 23 points. He said that's going to come down and your assists are going to go up. If you're about your numbers this year, we're not going to get back to these duck boats. Mm-hmm. And you look, and they each went down to 17 points a game. Assists went higher, and we went 66 and 16. So it was about, for the better good. Ubuntu was his phrase. Winning as a village. There are many ways to translate Ubuntu. That's also on the ring. So that's what it takes to get all the way, in my experience, is going all in for the team and not being about yourself.
So Jeannie, you may or may not know this, but during that season, 2008, when the Celtics went to play the Lakers, do you know this story? I don't know if many of you do. He made each player take out $100. The fact that they all had $100 is shocking to me to begin with. They all had to give Doc $100, and he put it in an envelope, and he stuffed it up in the ceiling of the Lakers visiting locker room. And they're all like, what are you doing, dude? And he said, the only way we come back here to get this money is if we're in the finals. And when they went back to the finals, the money was still there. Either that or he's got a great prop inside your Lakers organization to put it there for him. I'm not sure.
I thought that was like a fairy tale.
That's a true story.
Did it really
happen?
happen?
It's a true story.
Okay, that's
So same question, Jeannie. Bill, what are the components?
For me, it's about, we were faltering as an organization because we didn't have the leadership. We were changing coaches every 18 months. Mm-hmm. You couldn't figure out what was Laker basketball, because when you change coaches, because we had good coaches, we had Mike Brown, Mike D'Antoni, but when you change coaches like that, you can't change the roster fast enough to match the style of play that they would want to play. So it was just, we were all over the map. And so what I wanted to do was bring in somebody that could establish what Laker basketball means. And so Magic Johnson was the right person for us, because as he's put together the team, you see what he's trying to do. Every decision that's made complements the decision that was made before. And, that led us to, through free agency, to land the best player in the NBA in LeBron James, because he could see now, okay, this is what they're doing. We're not there yet, but he has faith in what Magic's building. Our fans have faith. They understand, what is being put together. And I think, the biggest challenge for that are the fake news about how we were supposedly trading our entire roster for a certain player, which is completely not true. But those kind of stories.
I leaked that.
No. Those stories leak out, and it hurt our young players. It wasn't fair. Magic got in front of that, and I think we're back on the right track. Hopefully that'll allow us to make a playoff push coming up here.
So you're not going to trade all those young guys for a certain player? I just want to make this very clear.
You guys
this is called a double sneak.
You can talk about this later, but I do want to follow up with Irvin, because I think it's been interesting. I think Irvin's biggest strength, which is communication and expressing himself has sometimes been his biggest weakness in this role. I wonder if you can address that. He's said some things that he probably shouldn't have said in the role he's in.
Yeah, he cost us $500,000 in fines.
Right.
You know, I think he's a very personable guy, and when he does interviews, he likes to maybe say too much, just, you know, because that's who he is. But he's evolved as an executive, and he knows what he needs to do now. But and we want Magic out there. We don't want him to not be himself and be the face of the franchise, because he is.
Just one more question on Magic. How much in percentages do you think he had to do with landing LeBron? Was he a major?
Oh yeah, we would not have had LeBron if it wasn't for Magic.
Okay, cool. I think we're 3, 2, 1 out of time. Jeannie Bush and Wick Grosbeck.
Jackie McMullen.
Great panel. Thank you.
Thanks, kiddo. That was great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Jackie.
That was really good.